They said he was insane. They said he was a clown, literally and figuratively. A man who painted his face white, wore a purple suit, and burned half of Gotham just to prove a point nobody asked for. So when he walked into that courtroom, not in chains, not in an orange jumpsuit, but in a pressed three-piece suit with that smile carved across his face, every lawyer, every judge, every powerful man in that room laughed. And why wouldn't they? What could a madman possibly say in his own defense? What argument could chaos itself construct? But here's what they didn't know. Here's what nobody in that room knew. The Joker had not come to defend himself. He had come to destroy them, and tucked inside a single manila folder held loosely in the hands of the most dangerous man alive was a document that was about to make every person in that courtroom wish, desperately wish, that they had never stopped laughing, because the joke was never about him. It was always about them. The courtroom of Gotham City's Central Justice Hall had not seen a crowd like this in decades. Every seat was filled, journalists pressed against the back walls, their pens ready, their eyes hungry. Outside, hundreds of citizens gathered around mounted screens, waiting to watch what most of them believed would be the fastest conviction in Gotham's history. After all, the charges were monstrous: arson, conspiracy, public terrorism, and the alleged orchestration of a plot that had paralyzed the city for 11 days straight. The man responsible for all of it now sat at the defendant's table, alone, with no attorney beside him. He had fired 3 lawyers in a single morning. The Joker had chosen to represent himself. When the bailiff announced his name and he rose from his chair, the laughter started almost immediately. It wasn't cruel at first, it was nervous. How the kind of laugh people release when they don't know how else to process something deeply strange. But then he straightened his tie, smoothed the lapel of his deep violet suit, and turned slowly to face the gallery with that smile, that wide, painted, permanent smile. And the nervous laughter became something uglier, something louder. Even the judge, the Honorable Raymond Harcastle, allowed himself a quiet smirk before tapping his gavel and calling for order. "Mr. Napier," the judge said, using a name the Joker had not responded to in years, "you understand that this court treats all proceedings with the utmost seriousness. I suggest you do the same." The Joker tilted his head just slightly. "Oh, Your Honor," he said softly, his voice smooth and low, almost gentle. "I am the only person in this room taking things seriously." More laughter. The prosecution team exchanged glances, amused, confident, dismissive. Lead prosecutor Daniel Harrow, a man widely regarded as Gotham's sharpest legal mind and a man with political ambitions that stretched far beyond the courtroom, leaned back in his chair with the casual ease of someone who had already won. He had prepared for theatrics. He had prepared for chaos. What he had not prepared for was patience. And the Joker, inexplicably, disturbingly, was being patient. The first hour passed predictably. The prosecution laid out its case with surgical precision. Witness after witness took the stand. Photographs were submitted. Testimonies were given. The Joker sat through all of it in near-perfect silence, occasionally scribbling something onto a yellow legal pad, occasionally glancing up at a specific face in the courtroom with an expression that wasn't anger and wasn't amusement. It was something harder to name, something that looked almost like recognition. When it was finally his turn to cross-examine the first witness, a city official named Commissioner's Aide Thomas Brill, the Joker stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and walked toward the stand with the unhurried confidence of a man on an evening stroll. "Mr. Brill," he began, "you testified that on the night of September 4th, you had no prior knowledge of the warehouse fire on Meridian Street. Is that correct?" "That is correct," Brill said firmly. "And you've never visited that warehouse?" "Not once?" "Never." The Joker nodded slowly, almost sympathetically, the way a doctor nods before delivering terrible news. Then he walked back to his table, picked up the manila folder that had been sitting there since the session began, and held it for just a moment. Not opening it, not presenting it, just holding it. Long enough for Brill's jaw to tighten, long enough for Harrow to sit forward in his chair, long enough for the room to go very, very quiet. "I have no further questions," the Joker said, and sat back down. The room exhaled. Harrow relaxed. The gallery murmured in confusion. What was that? A bluff? Another act of courtroom theater from a diagnosed madman playing pretend lawyer? But in the back row, half hidden beneath a gray overcoat, one man did not relax. One man had watched the Joker hold that folder, and in that precise moment, the color had drained entirely from his face. He stood quietly. He excused himself past the knees of other spectators and walked briskly toward the exit. He never made it. The doors were already locked from the outside, and somewhere in the room, the Joker's smile grew just a little wider. Not because the game was over, but because it had finally truly begun. The man in the gray overcoat was named Victor Selene. Most people in Gotham had never heard of him. That was entirely by design. He held no official title, carried no badge, and appeared on no government roster. And yet, for 11 years, Victor Selene had been the invisible thread connecting every major act of corruption in Gotham City. The fires, the disappearances, the verdicts that went the wrong way, the contracts awarded to the wrong men. He was the city's best-kept secret, and he had believed, with absolute certainty, that he would remain that way forever. He had not accounted for the Joker having nothing left to lose. When the bailiff blocked Selene at the door and the judge demanded order, the Joker finally rose from his chair for the second time. But this time he did not smile. This time his face carried something the courtroom had never expected to see carved into those painted features, a raw, unblinking seriousness that silenced the room more completely than any gavel ever could. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "I'd like to submit my defense." He opened the manila folder. What he placed on the table was not dramatic in appearance. It was a single document, aged at the corners, typed on official city letterhead, bearing 3 signatures at the bottom. He did not wave it. He did not shout. He simply slid it across to the court clerk and said quietly, "Page 1 of 43. Then he reached into his jacket and produced another, and another, page after page, each one landing on the clerk's desk with the soft, devastating certainty of a countdown reaching 0. The prosecution's table had gone completely still. Daniel Harrow's pen had stopped moving. His knuckles, wrapped around it, had turned white, because Harrow recognized that letterhead. He had signed 11 of those pages himself. What the documents contained was not complicated. Corruption rarely is at its core. It was a record, meticulous and dated, of a private agreement made between Gotham's most powerful men, judges, prosecutors, city commissioners, and property developers to systematically destroy a neighborhood known as the Narrows, displace its residents, manufacture criminal charges against those who resisted, and rebuild the land under new ownership worth hundreds of millions. The arson on Meridian Street, the very crime the Joker was being tried for, had been ordered not by him, but by the men sitting in that courtroom to prosecute him. The Joker had not started the fire. He had simply refused to let them bury it. "I lived in the Narrows," he said, and for the first time in that trial, perhaps for the first time in years, his voice cracked, just slightly, just enough. "Before the suit, before the paint, before all of this, I had a name and a neighbor and a door I came home to every night. And one morning, I came back and the door was ash, and the neighbor was gone. And the name, well," he paused, glancing down at his hands. "They took that too, when they locked me in Arkham for reporting it. The gallery was a graveyard of silence. I didn't burn Gotham," he continued, his composure returning like a mask sliding back into place. "I just held up a mirror, and you people, you respectable, laughing people, you couldn't stand what you saw in it. What followed was not justice, not in the clean, cinematic sense. Harrow was arrested before he reached the parking garage. Selene was taken into custody by federal officers who had been waiting, tipped off 3 days earlier by an anonymous source. 7 other men in that courtroom were formally investigated before the month was over. The judge sat motionless at his bench for a long time after the session dissolved into chaos, staring at nothing in particular. And the Joker walked, not fully free, not entirely vindicated, but released into the gray Gotham afternoon like a secret the city had accidentally told on itself. He paused on the courthouse steps, looked out at the cameras and the crowds, and for one brief, unguarded moment, the smile faltered. Underneath it was something older and quieter and almost unbearably human. Then it returned, wide, permanent, painted. He straightened his tie, descended the steps, and disappeared into the city that had made him. And Gotham, for once, did not laugh. The most dangerous man in the room isn't the one holding the weapon. It's the one who has already decided he has nothing left to lose and everything left to prove. If this story made you think, made you feel, or made you question who the real monsters are, then you already understand the Joker better than Gotham ever did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell, because the next story we tell might make this one look tame.